Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the podcast where we talk about horror movies on the list of the 200 best horror movies of all time put together by Rotten Tomatoes. My name is Clay McCormick, and with me, as always, is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited about what we're talking about today. This is a favorite of mine from a long time ago that I actually have not watched in a very long time. And I think I'm getting old because this movie, I don't know if it's because I'm getting old and my tastes have changed or if just because I made the mistake of watching it while I was eating breakfast.
Ooh,
because
that's
this
a brave
movie
choice.
is gross.
Yeah.
This is one of the grossest movies I've ever seen, and I forgot how gross it is.
It was real gross.
And it was one of those things where it's like right before certain gags were coming, I was like, oh, I forgot. And so I was seeing it in my head. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. The movie we're doing today is called Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead everywhere except for the United States. It's from 1992, directed by Academy Award winner Peter Jackson. Also
known for his films, The Lord of the Rings trilogy and
the
Hobbit trilogy.
And Frighteners and Heavenly Creatures. And we could talk about him in a little bit. Yeah. It's number 125 on this list. It's 88% with a 90.704 adjusted score.
Wow.
Yeah. It's well, we can talk about the placement later, but 125 is a pretty good place for it, actually. Yeah. Have you seen this before?
No. I had never even heard of this.
Yeah.
This is another, I think we're developing a pattern here where I've seen the more obvious sort of mainstream ones, and these weird niche ones have been all you, Clay.
Well, yeah, this movie was right in the pocket of when I started getting into these movies, and it was like I had seen Evil Dead, I had seen Dawn of the Dead. Yeah. So I had gotten into the gorier, wackier fare.
Yeah.
And then this was like the B level of those movies, and which is something else I would like to talk about later. But we're going to play a trailer. It's going to be a little bit different than usual because it's a very specific thing that I wanted to play. It's not the trailer. It is a ad from the movie company.
Yes.
To sell VHSs to stores.
What?
And I think it's fantastic. So I wanted to play it while you were here because usually you don't hear the trailer. But I wanted you to be able to see what we were listening to.
Oh, awesome! I'm very excited.
We'll play that and we'll be right back.
A 1993 theatrical release, Dead Alive is the horror film critics and audiences are screaming for.
Everybody should see this movie. It's the best, goriest film so far this year.
Time magazine calls it a family reunion of your bloodiest nightmares.
It's really gross, and it's really disgusting, and it's really, really good.
The New York Daily News calls Dead Alive the goriest fright film of all time.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
E! Entertainment proclaims it the most innovative horror film in years.
It's like Monty Python meets George Romero. Outstanding!
While The Hollywood Reporter calls Dead Alive one of the bloodiest films in cinematic history.
Gross, but truly entertaining.
In its nationwide theatrical release, the film has been backed by television advertising as well as an extensive print campaign. Publicity for the movie included a Dead Alive parade down New York City's Fifth Avenue that led to a gala zombie party celebrating the movie's release. Remember, Day of the Dead sold over 77,000 units. Witches sold 93,000 units. Graveyard Shift sold 102,000 units. The Serpent and the Rainbow sold 105,000 units. Return of the Living Dead 2 sold 105,000 units. Hellraiser 2 sold 115,000 units. Now, perfectly timed for Halloween, Dead Alive will be a must-see for every horror fan. And this movie will provide an irresistible treat for the tremendous teen audience. To ensure that Dead Alive is the hottest renter of the Halloween season, each 3-pack is accompanied by an attention-grabbing Dead Alive candy dispenser with an active screaming device. POP includes a 4-color poster and 4-page brochure. Dead Alive is available in both its R-rated version and its even bloodier unrated version. We dare you to watch it.
It's scary, it's funny, it's a roller coaster ride, it's a great time.
The movie has an order date of September 21st and a street date of October 13th.
So that was the Peter Jackson's Dead Alive VHS promo, which you should look up and you should watch because it's amazing.
Wow.
The people that they talk to need to be seen.
Especially the guy who's missing like all 4 of his front upper teeth.
Yeah, that guy, true fan right there.
Oh my God.
My favorite part is at the end when they go through and they talk about other horror movies and
how many units?
Yeah, that's that's old school marketing. I did want to talk before we get into it that did remind me of how much I miss video stores. I know you're a few years younger than me. I can't. Were you a video store kid at all, or was that kind of like on its way out?
I think it might have been in general on its way out, but in my town, we definitely we had a Blockbuster and we had something else, like a I want to say like Hollywood Video or something like that. Yeah, we grew up in the same town. What the fuck am I talking about?
Blockbuster was on Route 1.
Yes,
and we had Hollywood. Well, we actually had a few. We had Hollywood Video, which was in Cliftondale, which was like right down the street from where I lived.
Yep.
And before that it eventually was a Blockbuster. Before it was a Blockbuster, it was Hollywood Video. And before it was Hollywood Video, there was a store across the street in a smaller place called Video Waves.
Oh.
And that, I wish I had been older when that place was like in its heyday, because that was like the video store you see in the movies where it's like it was a mom and pop video store. It wasn't a chain.
Yeah.
They had lots of niche stuff that was
cool.
It was the kind of place where it's like one person is ordering the videos from whoever the distributor is. So whatever they have is like a mix of new stuff, but also like weird stuff.
Yeah, somebody's like specific niche tastes.
Yeah, like Dead Alive. Like Dead Alive is the perfect video store movie where I think I actually saw it in the video store before I ever watched it, where it was one of those. It's got a very unique cover where
it's the girl
pulling her
like
face
pulling
open,
her mouth open, and there's the zombie sort of eyes looking out.
Which is a nice approximation of something they do in the movie, which is amazing.
But no, to answer your question, I think the line between our generations is that you remember Video Wave or whatever it was, and that is not even on my radar. Like, I remember the Hollywood Video, and then I remember having the Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And I definitely remember when I was little, it was like a treat to get to rent a video. And then when I got a little bit older and had friends and we had cars, we would drive to the Blockbuster and pick out some ridiculous shit to watch.
I've spent a lot of time at video stores looking for movies. Like,
I feel like the closest thing we have to it now is just scrolling through Netflix,
and it's not satisfying at all.
It drives me insane. Like, when my husband and I sit down to like watch something, if we don't have something or at least an approximate idea of something we're looking for, I can't stand the scrolling. I'm just like, all right, I'll be on my phone. I'll be reading this book. I don't even care until you like. We need to narrow this down. I'm not the sort of person who can just like sit through the endless Hulu or Netflix or whatever your streaming service of choice is.
And it's weird too, because it's like, things are more available than they ever have been, really. Like, you can, between all of those services, there's a ton of stuff to choose from.
Yeah.
But I feel like I end up watching less stuff because of that reason. It's
same
almost
way.
too much.
You're paralyzed by choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also for me, I mean, it's the same reason that I got into collecting vinyl records. It's the same reason I still, love collecting comic books and stuff. Part of it for me is I like the hunt of things. And finding stuff and, being like, oh, well, that influenced this. I have to go find that now. And, the physical nature of these things is really satisfying. Yeah. Where everything is digital. Like, the reason I started collecting vinyl records is because I used to love finding new music. And now music it's weightless. You just go onto Spotify, you type in a band name, and you got everything right there in front of you.
And Spotify will, create and curate playlists for you.
Exactly, yeah.
Where it just, puts together an algorithm based on things that you've liked in the past and what you listen to the most, and then it spits out like, here's 20 songs that you're gonna like.
Yeah.
And typically, like, I'm usually pretty appreciative of that, because usually I do. It's a pretty accurate algorithm. But I understand what you're saying, because I'm definitely still like a physical book person.
Right.
I have a Kindle. I have bought a bunch of ebooks, but like that tactile response, browsing through a bookstore, browsing through a record shop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different experience, and it's kind of sad we don't have that for movies and film anymore.
Yeah, and especially movies like this. I think I've said it before. That's kind of how I got into this stuff, and I think it's how a lot of kids got into it. Is where it's you're at your friend's house.
Yeah.
This is what happened with me. I'm at my friend's house, and he's like, "Have you ever seen this movie called Evil Dead?" And I'm like, "No." And so he pulls out a VHS tape, no case. Just like a plain white sticker that says Evil Dead, and he's like, "Take this and watch it."
Ring film
Yeah,
style.
it's kind of like that, where it's
which
like
is
you
why
don't know
that
what you're
movie's
getting
so
into,
great, yeah.
and then you watch it and you feel like you've seen something unique that you don't know if anybody else has seen it.
Right.
So then you start looking for people who have seen it, and that's how you develop
Or introducing
like
it
friendships.
to your own friends and then seeing who likes it and the people who like it and who
I can
get
tell
it.
you from experience, sometimes that does not go well.
I can also tell you that.
I have an amazing story about. We're getting way off topic, but I think this story is worth telling. My friends and I used to. There was a youth group at my church and the older kids would get together and we would watch movies every now and then. And it would generally myself and our mutual friend Dave would end up choosing the movie because we usually had the strongest opinions.
Oh no.
Well, no. And then one time, one of the other girls in the group was fed up with us always choosing the movies. So she says, I'm going to choose the movie this time. We were like, fine, that's fine, no problem. So we go to the next person's house and she brings this movie and she puts it in and we're like, what's this movie called? Requiem for a Dream, huh?
Holy shit.
And so we watched Requiem for a Dream at a church kid get together at probably the house of one of the more religious families. And then at the end, there was just kind of silence.
Yeah.
And then the girl who brought it was like staring at the floor and she just said, it sounded like a nice movie. The title sounded so nice.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I guess be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I feel an immense amount of pity for that girl.
Yeah, it's okay.
Hey,
I'm glad I watched it. Great movie. I was like, great pick. That was awesome. Anyway, we're talking about Dead Alive.
Yes.
Which was directed by Peter Jackson, written by Peter Jackson, Steven Sinclair, and Fran Walsh, starring Timothy Balm, Diana Peñalver, terrible Spanish, Elizabeth Moody, and Peter Jackson in a small part as the creepy Undertaker's assistant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Amanda, would you like to tell us what happens in this movie?
I would love to. Overprotective mother Vera Cosgrove, spying on her grown son Lionel as he visits the zoo with the lovely Paquita, is accidentally bitten by the fearsome Sumatran rat monkey. When the bite turns his beloved mother into a zombie, Lionel tries to keep her locked safely in the basement, but her repeated escapes turn most of the neighbors into the Walking Dead, who then crash a high society party thrown by Lionel's boorish Uncle Les.
That really undersells this movie quite a bit.
Yeah, it really does. That's a generic Google description that really does not do justice to the film. Some things you might find in this movie are lunchtime corpse fornication, kicking ass for the Lord,
absolutely,
anthropomorphic intestines, and of course, questionable parenting, aka an abundance of mother love.
Yes. As a place to start...
Where is the place to start with this?
Do you think this is the most intense version of questionable parenting we have seen thus far?
Ooh.
Because not only does this movie feature a Norman Bates and mother sort of smothering type relationship, but even after she's dead, she comes back to life and controls his life to the point of, then we find out that she actually murdered her husband and her husband's lover.
Uh-huh.
And then at the end of the movie, she turns into this gigantic, like weird, big-breasted chicken monster type thing. And opens up her stomach and tries to essentially pull him back into her womb.
She tries to unbirth him.
Yes. Ooh, that's a good word for it.
That's all I could think. Yeah. I mean, I would say in terms of if we're taking what happens in this movie literally, and I don't know how else we can take it,
Just not a lot of metaphor in this movie, I don't think. But
then yes, I think thus far at least this is the most egregious example of truly questionable parenting.
I think so. This movie, there's a word that I came across recently. It was on another podcast. I think it was, at least this is what I think that they said.
Okay.
And I hope it's what they said,
Okay.
because if it's not, I'm stealing it and I'm copywriting it.
Okay.
They referred to, I believe it was Nightmare University podcast, which is very good. They referred to a movie as Splatstick, which I think is a very good way to describe this movie,
Yes.
as obviously being a mix between a splatter film and a slapstick comedy, which is absolutely what this is.
Oh yeah.
It is, as I said, I haven't seen it in a while. I forgot exactly how gross this movie is, and it revels in its grossness.
This movie was so gross.
Yeah.
I will say to anyone who might be listening to this prior to watching this movie, do not let the fact that it came out in 1992 fool you. Even if the effects aren't the most like quote unquote realistic that you've ever seen, I guarantee you they are the grossest.
Yeah, it is. I was gonna say it's quantity over quality, but they're not bad.
No,
they're all pretty good.
Like, when you put them in the time frame that they were made,
Yeah.
they're actually really good.
I actually don't know how much money this movie cost, but
oh yeah, I don't know.
it's they're not skimping on stuff.
And if they are, they're doing a brilliant job of masking that and pulling it off anyway.
yeah, there's a thing that happens towards the end in the big, I don't know what you would call it,
The
but
brouhaha.
yeah, that I don't remember. A lot of these gags in this movie are very well ingrained in my brain because of how unique they are.
Yeah, they're
the one
very
that I
unique.
didn't remember, that I actually had to go rewind and watch again because I wasn't sure how they did it, was when the guy gets his whole face pulled off like
Oh
a hat.
my god. When he gets his face degloved.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as though his face were a mask.
Yes.
They pull it off.
Yeah.
And he's got,
I love when he's a zombie and he stands up and it's just like "Rrr,"
yeah.
the like skinless bloody face.
But I was watching it and it happened very quickly and it looked so
Yeah.
good. I was like, how the hell did they do that? And I went back and you say, oh, he's waving his arm, and one of the arm waves they
right,
cut, and
right.
the face,
they
they
got
changed
some,
the bodies out.
but the cuts, like obviously they do a lot of these sort of like gross, grotesque, like zombie murdering people gags with by using cuts, but they do it fairly seamlessly in
Yeah.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like movies like even big budget movies like Alien, where famously, I don't know if you remember, there's when they bring Ash's head back to life.
Yeah.
And it's like clearly a dummy.
Yeah.
And then there's a hard cut where it's clearly
his head
Ian
just
Holm.
like built into a thing.
Yeah, even big budget movie like Hollywood movies sometimes don't look that good, but a lot of they cover that stuff pretty well. But
Yeah.
we might be getting ahead of ourselves.
Probably as usual.
Yeah. The first thing that stood out is to me in this movie is that the opening scene takes place on Skull Island from King Kong.
In 1957.
In 1957, King Kong clearly being a big favorite of Peter Jackson's.
Yeah, I don't think I'd put that together until I was watching this and was like, well, fuck. All right.
Yeah, he went on, of course, to make a very long King Kong movie that one of my friends reviewed as I fell asleep in the middle of it and I woke up and I didn't realize I missed anything. So take that for what you will. I not to get too into the social commentary angle of our show, but
Such as it is.
did you find there's some fairly problematic representations of Native people, let's put it that way, at the beginning.
I wish the people listening to this could see your face as you were trying to
I was trying to figure out how the best way to say that.
delicately not
Yeah.
accuse Peter Jackson of racism.
I don't know if I wouldn't go that far because it's just so goofy.
It is. It's clearly like a pastiche of lots of other movies, especially those sorts of like big monster movies and
Yeah.
things that were actually more popular immediately post 1957 when
Yeah.
this movie is supposed to take place. But to answer or to respond to what you were saying, yeah, they're pretty problematic portrayals of everybody who's not white.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, to be fair, they're not super generous to the people who are white either. They're
that's very,
everybody in
that's
this movie
very
is kind
true.
of an
like,
idiot.
Like the quote unquote like best white person is Lionel.
Yeah.
And he's got some issues,
Yeah.
shall we say. I would actually say Paquita is like the best.
Yeah.
I love Paquita.
Yeah. That was one jumping to her. Very tropey portrayal. I kind of hate that word, but she's this I didn't know there were Latin people in New Zealand, but I guess there are.
I mean, probably.
She's got this grandmother who is like a weird witch fortune teller sort of thing.
I got the vibe that she was Latinx of some sort,
Yeah.
and her grandma was maybe not.
Sure.
I don't know, because her grandma seemed more like Eastern European.
Yeah, she
reading to me in
feels
terms
like
of her accent.
Yeah, she feels
Yeah.
like a traditional movie kind of like gypsy character.
Yes.
Like the woman from The Wolfman or something.
Yeah, very much so.
And in there they give you this weird sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Exotic, ethnic. I'm using voodoo as a catch-all, but you know what I mean, like a spiritual.
Yeah, like a mysticism.
Mysticism. There we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. Which now probably doesn't fly super well. But again, this movie is so tropey and so like reveling in the silliness of monster movies that it's like it feels like they needed to do that.
I feel like because this movie is trying in certain ways to kind of be an homage to those sorts of movies and recall those sorts of movies while adding on it's an interesting movie because it combines a lot of different pieces, like subgenre pieces of horror movies as a big umbrella.
Yeah.
Like you do have the vibe of those movies that came out in like the 60s and early 70s that took place in like the late 50s, early 60s. It captures that vibe through its setting and through the sort of conceit of this, horrible monster creature from a strange Eastern island is brought into civilization. And then, it also kind of plays with those more like Evil Dead, sort of like gory zombie splatter films altogether. So I think it can get away with a little more of leaning into those stereotypes and tropes and having it be like a gloss of earlier films.
I don't know the man, but I don't think Peter Jackson is a racist, probably. So
I mean, I don't know him either, so I don't know. But it's definitely I think watching a movie like this in 2020 where so much of this stuff is like in the cultural conversation all the time,
exactly,
we can't help but feel a twinge of sort of discomfort and guilt, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched this movie, again, I haven't watched it in a long time. I've watched this movie countless times.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever even thought about that.
Yeah.
So clearly it's in the air, so
Right.
it's
Right,
a different time.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with sort of acknowledging that like this toes a line, But like horror movies are kind of meant to be transgressive, so
Exactly. Yes.
I'm all right with it.
I mean, later in the movie, what's his name? Lionel goes to a veterinarian who is
a Nazi,
who is a literal
scientist.
Nazi, because he at a certain point he turns around and catches his lab coat and it tears off and you see a swastika underneath his shirt.
It was like I knew before that happened that he was obviously a Nazi.
Oh yeah,
and then when that happened, I was like, well, I'm glad we're making the subtext.
Yeah,
text.
he's like Dr. Strangelove dialed to 11.
Right, and that's the thing that was interesting to me with this movie is that so many of the pieces, whether they're sort of these broader set pieces like Skull Island or the Cosgrove's house,
Great house.
Yeah, great house, or the veterinarian's lab. And the characters themselves, they're all recalling these like bigger, kind of iconic horror movies and thrillers and sort of just weird movies like the Dr. Strangelove and then definitely the Psycho. Norman Bates and his mother. That's a heavy shadow over this.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. What I find interesting about this movie, and just to get it out of the way, what happens in this movie is the Sumatran rat monster gets brought back to New Zealand and bites Lionel's mother, which then turns her into a zombie, which then she starts essentially falling apart, literally.
Yes.
And infecting other people in various ways, which need to be seen to be believed.
Yes, and he will not kill her. Lionel cannot bring himself to kill her or most of the other zombies. So he just kind of herds them into his basement.
Which is one of my favorite parts of the movie, is that it's one of the things that these movies tend to forget is that, or at least I don't know if they tend to forget them, but I prefer it when they decide to do this, which is when they keep ratcheting up what's not the tension, but like what they're putting on their character.
Yeah.
And like once the ball starts rolling, it just keeps rolling.
Yeah.
Like that's what I loved about the original Evil Dead, is that there's really no way to win in that movie. It just gets harder and harder and crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier. And then Ash wins basically by accident.
Yeah.
And at the end, he kind of doesn't even win, depending on how you read the movie.
That's true.
And like I don't know if you ever saw the remake of Evil Dead.
No,
but
I didn't.
It's worth watching.
Okay.
But where I kind of felt like that movie lost its footing was it didn't have that sense of the ball kept rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling,
Yeah.
and there wasn't time to explain stuff. It was just like, no, these things are evil and they're coming to get you. And this movie does a really great job of keeping that going, because once the zombies start showing up, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And
Oh, yeah.
like when you think it can't get any crazier, it gets 3 times crazier.
Yeah, yeah. It escalates.
Yeah,
Like,
it goes from
steadily.
It starts off as a weird creature from another island bites a woman and infects her with a disease that turns her into an
Sumatran rat monkey.
Sumatran rat monkey. Bites a woman, turns her into a zombie. That's the first thing that happens.
Yes.
And the last thing that happens is this same woman has turned into the aforementioned giant weird chicken monster,
Mother monster.
and opens up her stomach to eat her son. It's a crazy movie.
Oh, and did we mention that this is on top of the roof of her burning
Yes.
mansion house?
Yeah.
While a horde of other zombies that they have created and variously goopified or dismembered are burnt below them.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
This movie, I can say this movie delivers.
On
100%.
its premise?
Yes, it
absolutely.
100% delivers. Usually you go into these movies, I go into these movies thinking like, all right, it'll have a couple things and it'll be over. This one just delivers all the way through. It's
Yeah.
like they decided what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a crazy monster movie, zombie movie.
Yep.
And they just made the craziest one they could possibly think of.
Yes, they did.
And I personally think that this should be held as the standard for anybody who's trying to make a movie like this. You have to be at least this good or better.
But I don't know how you...
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's tough.
Yeah,
you got to figure out how to do it.
It's kind of like once you've gotten to this point, where do you go from here?
Yeah, but it's like every time I see a new movie that comes out that's sort of in this vein,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, this movie's crazy, and in my head, and from now on, now that it's back and fresh in my mind, I'm gonna be like,
Yeah.
but is it crazier than Dead Alive?
Well,
'Cause-
didn't even like Simon Pegg say that this movie was like a huge inspiration for him with Shaun of the Dead?
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
I
Yeah,
feel like I
absolutely.
read that somewhere.
Yeah.
I wish I remembered where.
Well, because I feel like this is kind of the truest successor to Evil Dead,
Oh, definitely.
because
oh yeah.
that vibe, the tone that they strike in, more specifically, Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, a lot of people have tried, I think.
Yeah.
And the horror comedy thing is kind of whatever, but Lionel is a very good analog for Ash. He's essentially Ash, even more pathetic than Ash.
Yeah, he's
and
pretty
Ash is pretty pathetic. It features more gore and craziness than any of the Evil Dead movies,
Yep.
and on the same kind of scale as the Evil Dead movies in style. And he even uses a garden tool as a weapon at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I feel like for me, I was just so overwhelmingly distracted by like the obvious Norman Bates parallels that I registered that, but not as fully.
Mm-hmm. I just launched into talking about. Did you like the movie? I didn't. I had a lot of between video stores and
I feel like I
had
don't
all
need
this
to
stuff in my
ask
mind.
you if you liked the movie. I think I can tell that you liked the movie. I did like the movie. It was.
I'm sorry. I don't want to make it sound like I'm talking at you about.
Look,
Listen, Amanda, if you could quiet down, I need to tell you why this is a great movie.
I admire your enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you.
But when we had hit our randomizer and this had popped up last time we recorded, I remember talking to you and you were like, "Have you seen this before?" And I said, "No." Like, "Oh, what is it? What is it about?" And you were just like, "Oh, you're in for it." And I was like, "What?" So I'm kind of glad you didn't tell me anything about it going into it. It was kind of strange and bewildering, but also really fun to go into it pretty blind. Like obviously I had read like the very basic kind of synopsis of like, what is this movie? But I didn't realize how really insane it gets.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I was thrown a little bit by the very beginning when they're on Skull Island and there's this like stereotypical turn of the century like adventurer dude.
Yeah, it's very
And
Raiders of
his-
the Lost Ark kind of.
yeah, and his like ethnic band of mercenaries or whatever you want to call them. And they're trucking this wooden cage made of like bamboo sticks and cloth on two poles, and they're running away from you don't really know who at the time. And when the like native tribe pops up and the hired help drops the box, and I was just like through that whole thing, I'm just sort of like, am I supposed to be taking this seriously? Am I supposed to be laughing at this? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And then they drop the box and the guy pulls out like a Tommy gun,
Yes, yeah.
shoots over the heads of all of the indigenous tribesmen, and then chops the box free of the poles, hoists it up on his shoulder by himself, and then it's just like, all right, come on then, and runs down the hill. I was like, oh, okay, I see. This movie is insane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and from then on, I was just like, I was on board. I was on and ready for the ride, because it was the moment where I was just like, I think this movie's gonna be weird. And then when they're in the Jeep and said adventurer gets bitten and they kick him out of the Jeep, and I forget the word they use for bite.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but they spot one. Like, he's just laying there. He looks totally fine and normal. And then they point at one. They're like, yeah, there's one. And they chop off his hand. And then they look over and they say, there's one. And there's one on his other arm. And then all of a sudden, one just kind of appears on his head. And they decapitate him. And then the, like, opening credits roll. I was like, yeah, this is really insane.
Well, my favorite part of that is that they complete their job. After they kill the guy, they deliver the thing to wherever it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and
At
the
least
one
that's what
guy
they imply
has like
anyway.
the money. He's handed the money, like kind of holds it over his head and runs back to his friends with it. It's like, all right, yeah.
Yeah. Do you like these kinds of horror movies generally? Like the big gore splatter films?
I think I have to be in the right mood.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I have to. In this case, it worked out well for me, despite my not really knowing. But usually, I kind of like to know.
Yeah.
I kind of like to know going into it, like that I'm supposed to take this, like sort of like quasi facetiously, and it's sort of tongue in cheek.
Yeah. You find out very quickly that the tongue is arguably through the cheek in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It showed its true colors pretty quick.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate from this kind of movie. I like not being strung along like I'm supposed to be, like treating this really seriously and getting like super emotionally invested. And I don't think that's what the point of this movie is. It's not to get you emotionally invested in the characters. It's just to take you on a really bizarre, crazy ass story.
Yeah. I mean, the love story is generated by, the Paquita wants to date the cool, hot delivery guy,
she
pharmacy
is just
guy.
ready for any man that she chooses.
Yep.
Which is great. I'm all for it. She seems like she's got a goal in mind.
Yeah.
And she needs a dude to get there, so she's gonna go find herself some dude.
Yeah. And the one she wants isn't paying her any attention, and so her weird gypsy grandmother.
I love the scene where the guy she wants, he's like a doctor or whatever, and he leaves, and as he's leaving, and she's all like swooning and smiling at him, and if you look over her shoulder, her grandma's in the background like just looking real fucking creepy. It's the best. I love the grandma.
But yeah, the love story in the movie is generated not by them like having a meet cute where they fall in love with each other. It's the grandmother saying, "No, you want this guy, this nerd guy."
Yeah.
Or I should say, it's not even that. She pulls a tarot card with a symbol on it.
Yes.
And then when Lionel, the doofus, comes in, he knocks over a thing of licorice, and it ends up accidentally making the symbol. So that is what starts her down the road, unquestioning from that point on.
Yeah, she's 100%
Commits.
in right away. Like the only time in which she's not like fully in it with Lionel is when he breaks up with her.
Right.
And she tries to sort of half-heartedly move on, and she can't do it.
And she does get to date briefly the cool doctor pharmacist guy.
You
but
mean the most boring man in the world?
all he does is talk about rugby, which I thought was funny.
My God. I had flashbacks.
Oh, no.
Just, dating in your early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These things happen.
I dated a lot of rugby players.
I didn't date any rugby players, but I have definitely dated that person who only wants to talk about their one thing.
Right. Yeah.
And has no idea that they have never asked you a single thing about yourself.
Yeah. Have you watched the show Sex Education? I feel like I've brought this up before.
You mentioned it to me that I should, but I haven't.
There's a character on there who this one girl is infatuated with, and when she finally gets to hang out with him, all he does is talk about the Rubik's Cube because he's like ranked 34th in the world at the Rubik's Cube.
Wait, I think I know this guy.
Yeah. But yeah, I know that kind of person too. It's very tiring.
We've all met that person. We've all also probably been that person at some point
I'm sure.
in our lives. Yeah.
I'm sure I was that person when I was like, "Hey, new person, have you seen Dead Alive?" You would love it. What?
Everyone would love it.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't love it?
Yeah. What's fun about this movie is they kind of take the idea of the Sam Raimi Evil Dead movies where Sam Raimi's he doesn't keep it secret that he loves slapstick humor and works a lot of that stuff in there. And I feel like Peter Jackson just took that ball and ran with it. Where this movie is like, it's not just like every now and like an Evil Dead where every now and then a monster will do something weird and there'll be like a Three Stooges sound effect.
Yeah.
It's this one. It's like they took traditional comedy setups, like Three Stooges type setups where it's, the important people are coming over for dinner, so we have to make sure we're on our best behavior.
Yep.
Or even romantic comedy setups with Lionel and Paquita.
Yeah.
And they just ran those through the splatter filter.
Yeah.
And so instead of the Three Stooges making a mess behind the wealthy dowager's back and getting into a pie fight, you've got these undead creatures with their faces falling off while Lionel is trying to walk these. I forget what the group is called, the Women's League or something.
The WLW.
The WLWL.
Or is it LWLW?
Yeah,
I
one
forget
of
which.
them,
Yeah.
They're coming over for lunch.
The women's. Oh, fuck. Who fucking cares?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
They're coming over for lunch with his mother, but his mother's already basically a corpse and her face is falling off.
Yeah, she can barely speak.
Yeah, and it's that thing where the two people who are there are like delightfully oblivious to the disgusting stuff that's happening while Lionel is running around behind, but trying to keep everything together.
Of the couple that came for dinner or lunch or whatever, the wife was pretty aware.
That's true. Yeah. The husband not so much.
The husband completely not. He's like eating the custard with her like gross like pus and blood in it and like doesn't even notice. And
the best part of that
she's
scene,
eating her own ear.
The best part of that scene is not even a gag. It's when they're talking about what they need to do for like the next season, and he just slams the table and he goes, "We need another war."
Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, so this movie is really interesting because the time period matters a lot.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a general aesthetic. It tells you something about how people are expected to behave.
Although it does, I do wonder, everything in this movie is so jacked up, style and everything. And unless New Zealand in 1992 looked like the 50s in America, I feel like that was probably jacked up too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I think it is that like taking the period to the extreme.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
heightening all of it
Yeah.
is what makes it extra important, because they're not trying to like smooth it into the background and make it like, oh, this is probably in the 50s, but it could really be any time. They're like amping all of it up. They're going super campy with a lot of it.
Right.
Like if this movie were set in 1977.
Oh my God, I'm an idiot.
Why are you an idiot?
It never occurred to me that this movie takes place in the 50s.
Yes.
Oh my God. I never realized that. I just thought it was a style choice that everyone was, it was like the 90s. The swing was back and popular again. It has never occurred to me that this takes place in the 50s.
Clay, do you want us to edit this out?
No, I think this needs to be heard because I'm an idiot.
This is my favorite thing that's ever happened.
Wow.
Yes, that is what I was getting at.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, continue. I'm really interested. Even more so than I was before.
Well, I was what I was trying to say, and I was kind of confused why you were like sort of disagreeing with me. I was like, but it is in the 50s.
Yeah, I'm dumb.
Look, you watched this for the first time when you were how old?
Oh, I don't know, 15?
Years don't matter when
Yeah.
you're 15. Anything before like 2 years prior is a long ass time
And to
ago.
be fair, do they ever actually say it?
Yes.
When do they say it?
Well, in the very opening title cards where they go and get the Sumatran rat monkey.
I can't read. I'm not a
explains-
loser.
This explains why you had such a hard time with A Quiet Place. All the subtitles are just meaningless to you. No, but I think that it does such a, that's why I think it does such a great job with the sort of psycho Norman Bates sort of thing, because it's supposed to be taking place in the same time period.
I know that now.
And there are like rules. There are rules of decorum. There are things that are considered like normal and not normal that are pretty rigid in the 50s.
Right.
Like I keep wanting to call him Norman. Lionel.
God, I'm such a moron. I just thought it was a choice.
Just a purely aesthetic
Yeah,
choice to make everything
people-
look like it's 1950s.
People were doing 50s stuff, and then I don't know. Brian Setzer was popular.
I mean, everybody was like listening to those songs that are now played before IMAX movies in the
Exactly.
Jordan's theater.
Exactly. You and me, and the bottle makes 3 tonight.
Mambo number 5.
You know that guy was German?
What?
Yeah, Lou Bega is German.
But he has a what?
Now who doesn't know what's going on? Equal.
It would be amazing if you were lying.
I'm not. I'm 100% serious.
But it would be amazing if you were lying, just to be like, see, and here's the thing you didn't know.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Back to
It's okay.
the aesthetic
Like,
of the
but
50s.
even like, why is there a Nazi veterinarian just like hanging out in the town? It's because, after World War II, those guys who weren't caught had to go somewhere, and most of them went places like New Zealand, Australia, and South America.
To be fair, for me,
The rest of this podcast is going to be just me rubbing in the ways in which Clay should have realized.
to be fair, for my own sake,
Yes.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for this movie not to specifically take place in the 50s
Oh,
and
sure.
it just be an aesthetic choice. It's pretty silly.
Yeah. No, I don't think the time period.
I'm not trying to dispute anything you're saying. I'm
No,
just trying to
no.
make myself feel better.
I don't. It's okay. No, I think the time period, like setting it in that time period with all the connotations of like the 1950s way of life.
Sure.
Like the family unit and how you had to act in public, and everybody was sort of like prim and proper, and like men went out with their hats on, and women had to like dress up a certain way every day, and just like you know, all of the 1950s sort of trappings, I think, make the commentary in this like really fun.
Yeah.
Like, you know, respect your mother and father and all
Right.
of that.
And it's a very, to pick that time period and to make a movie this subversive
yes.
is
Yeah.
definitely, I know now, it's definitely a conscious decision.
This is my favorite thing that's ever happened.
Oh, I've just lost all of my integrity.
I think you would have lost your integrity if you had tried to pretend that you did not misunderstand.
Yeah, I'm real glad I figured it out. Otherwise, this would have been a really weird conversation.
Would have gotten very, very
This
strange.
would have been 15 minutes of me arguing that 1992 was pretty weird too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Knowing what I know now, that is a very interesting choice of a setting, because it is a very
Well, it's supposed to be like a, you know, wholesome.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of this shorthand for like an innocent time.
And Peter Jackson's movies before he became an acclaimed, he probably has one of the most interesting film careers of anybody I've seen.
Yeah.
It's similar to it's like David Cronenberg jacked up to 11.
Yeah.
Where David Cronenberg started his career with these kind of weird, high concept, gory sci-fi movies, and eventually there was kind of a line in the early 90s where he moved into more kind of weird psychological thrillers and has kind of gotten more normal kind of. He makes kind of like weird dark dramas, but they're not as fun as they used to be.
Yeah. That's
Peter
fair.
Jackson's first like 3 or 4 movies were
Batshit insane.
Yeah. Have you seen Bad Taste or Meet the Feebles?
I don't know if you remember.
That's how everybody should respond to Have you seen Meet the Feebles who have seen Meet the Feebles.
I don't know if you remember. I forget if it was you know, Clay and I and a bunch of our friends all get together around 4th of July and New Year's Eve. We all sort of have like a big group tradition. We all hang out together for a few days on an isolated mountain in New Hampshire.
In the 50s.
In the 50s. But one of the more recent get-togethers, such as that, our friend Sean Cordy put Meet the Feebles on, and I lasted about 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's not a great movie.
It's real bad.
Yeah, but that and his first movie, which was literally called Bad Taste. You know, he clearly has a very subversive kind of punk rock sensibility about the way he's doing stuff.
Which I had no idea because I was fairly young when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like that's what this guy has done.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, he did those 3. I can't remember if he's got another. Well, I got the thing right here. I may as well look.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having this conversation earlier with my husband, and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he went straight from like this movie to the first Lord of the Rings movie. And I was like, shut the fuck up.
That's not true. So he did.
Greg, you're wrong.
He did Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, Dead Alive, which are all very weird, very subversive. There's actually a lot of Meet the Feebles in this. Meet the Feebles is all.
That.
Both of the first 2 movies are very puppet heavy.
Yeah.
And Meet the Feebles is essentially like a weird, skeezy 42nd Street movie featuring Muppets, essentially.
Yeah. It's sort of like What If the Muppets Show, but drugs.
Yeah. And Dead Alive has a lot of puppetry in it, whether it's the baby.
A little bit of claymation.
If you
in
guys
there,
didn't
too.
know, there's a zombie gives birth to a zombie baby in this movie who then runs amok, eventually in a scene I forgot about, tearing his way through the front of a woman's face from the back, and it's one of the best things I've ever seen. But we'll get into some of that stuff when we could talk about that in a minute. So he did Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, Dead Alive, and then he did Heavenly Creatures, which is a lot more like sober, I guess is a word to use. It's a weird. I actually haven't seen it, but I know it's not those other 3.
This movie makes you feel like you're on a bunch of drugs. So
Yeah. Heavenly Creatures is I believe famous for being Kate Winslet's first movie.
Oh.
Or one of her first movies.
Probably a super downer.
Yes, I believe it is. And then he does The Frighteners, which, have you seen The Frighteners?
Yes.
A lot of fun. That's like his first real kind of Hollywood thing where he's kind of taking his sensibility, weird comedy sensibility, kind of making a more mainstream movie. And then he makes Lord of the Rings. That's his
Okay.
next movie is Lord of the Rings. Fun story, trivia corner. The Frighteners involved a lot of CGI.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to essentially build a CGI company in New Zealand where he was making the movie. That company became Weta, which is the
Oh.
company that did all the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason that they did Lord of the Rings is because after they did the Frighteners, he was like, I have this giant special effects production company. I got to do something with it. So then he essentially used Weta as an excuse. Well, Weta was the catalyst to start his push to do Lord of the Rings, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, he does these 3 really weird splatter,
Really weird.
subversive punk rock movies, and then he kind of evens out. But it's probably the strangest tonal shift I've ever seen
Yes.
in a filmmaker's career.
Yeah. It's a very the breadth of sort of genre and style in his filmography is like it just doesn't even make sense to me. Like I don't
Yeah.
even like I see a progression between like sets of like 3 to 5 movies. You can sort of see how he gets from like point A to point like D or whatever. But after that, then he just kind of switches completely, and you're like, how did we get here? Where did this come from?
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit. Feel bad isn't the word to use.
I don't feel bad for him.
No, I don't feel bad for it. But it's like he made
Clay.
He made the Lord of the Rings, right?
He has more money than God.
I understand.
At this point.
I understand. But from a creative standpoint, he made Lord of the Rings.
Look, you sympathizing with men who are obviously psychopaths throughout the course of this podcast
It is a running
getting
theme. Yes.
deeply concerning.
He made 3 Lord of the Rings movies, which took like 10 years out of his life or something, and then he does King
Gave
Kong.
him $1 billion.
Yeah, but you can't buy creative satisfaction, So he makes King Kong, whatever. I don't think anybody really cared.
I think he was creatively satisfied by it.
Sure. But then he makes 3 Hobbit movies that I feel like he probably didn't want to make. And then that's kind of it. So he spent like the last 15 years.
kind of it.
Well, he did that World War I documentary, which is really good. And I
Yeah.
think he was creatively satisfied by that. But again, that was like, I won't get into that. Well, that's for a different podcast. But it's like he spent 15 years of his life making Lord of the Rings
He
movies.
spent 15 years of his life making more money than we could ever imagine.
Amanda, it's not all about cash.
I mean, but it's mostly about it.
I bet when he was in the edit bay for The Hobbit Part 3, thinking to himself, wiping the sweat off of his forehead with $100 bills. I bet he was thinking to himself, man, what I wouldn't give, I'd give it all up to make Bad Taste 2.
He has the money where he could do that.
That's
now
true.
If he
He
wanted to.
maybe he
Yeah,
did. I don't know.
Maybe he did. Maybe
he's
he
like
is
Prince
right now.
and he's got like that
Oh,
vault full of stuff
like a
that
backlog.
he's just never come out.
He's just gonna wait until.
There's Prince has shot entire movies that have
Yeah.
gone that are just in there and they've never come out.
Yeah, and
Probably
then
because they're bad.
hey,
I'm sorry. Prince
Hey.
is a genius.
thank you.
He wasn't great at everything though.
Look,
Most
look,
things.
Look, let's not go
Anyway,
there. That's a different podcast too.
So I was gonna talk about first I'll talk about the music. Don't love the music. I think the music
Really?
is very well written, but like the piano parts are really nice.
Yeah.
But it's got that thing that like early era synth string sound, which I can't stand it because every
Okay.
time that I hear that, I think bad movie. Because it's usually it's like it's a cheap movie. We got one guy on a synthesizer making the music, and instead of doing like a John Carpenter-y thing, he's trying to emulate an orchestra,
Okay.
and it always sounds shitty.
Do you think that might be on purpose though?
Maybe. I don't know. It's a tough call in this era because it's like that stuff was fairly ubiquitous. Like I think a lot of that stuff was going on.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a stylistic choice or it's just like we can't afford Howard Shore
Right.
yet.
Right. So like if this movie were being made 15 years later and had that music, you would maybe feel a little more convinced by the idea that it's like a choice to
Yeah.
emulate that sort of like
Yeah,
old
probably.
lower quality music, whereas given the time period,
I don't think you should want to emulate that sound because I think it's a terrible sound.
But I understand for a movie that's trying to emulate so many other factors and sort of like twist them and turn them on their head a little bit. I could understand if that was a thought.
True.
But
yeah.
I think you are. I know you are the more musically inclined of the two of us.
Oh,
so
come on.
I trust your opinion on that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just, it's a personal taste thing. But I think the actual music is actually very nice.
Yeah.
There is it's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not cheerful, but kind. It's not horror movie music for the most part. It's
There are a couple moments where there's, God, I wish I remembered exactly when it was, but there was a cut at one point where it sort of cuts to the exterior. It goes from like a daylight scene, and then it cuts to the exterior of the house with the moon moving out from behind a cloud, and it kind of hits this like organ sort of horror movie haunted house music really hard. And it was kind of a great cut because I think it might be the transition after the Mathesons from the WLWL come for like lunch or dinner or whatever. I think it's the cut between the end of that scene and the beginning of the next.
Yeah, okay.
And it's kind of a great, like, because that's the moment where like you really know, okay, we have a zombie.
Right.
And then it cuts to this like kind of music. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it comes down that I just don't. It's the score is good. I just don't like it.
Yeah, I mean it is a little all over the place because I think it is trying to do what you said earlier, where this movie takes like romantic comedy and all of these different genres, and then sort of runs it through this filter, and it tries to do that with the soundtrack too.
Yeah,
which can make it feel a little bit scattershot.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
As for body count, I can't really.
Oh my God, I don't know.
No, I can't. I can't really equate what I didn't count.
More than 20. Less than 100?
Yeah, at least.
I mean,
that's a good way to say it. Yeah,
this is like a Patrick Bateman's like kill count when he tries to self-assess, and he's like 10, 20, maybe 40 people. I don't know.
Yeah. So instead of that, I don't think we did a great job explaining what actually happens in this movie.
No, I mean,
so I don't know if you have any things that stand out you would like to mention. We didn't even mention the karate fighting priest. Who has the immortal line,
I kick ass for the Lord.
It is the best line.
Yeah. Who?
Because it's so unexpected. Because you meet that priest. Okay. All right. Okay. Poor sweet Mother Vera gets, quote unquote, killed by a tram. And so then they try to bury her. They do bury her. She zombies her way out of the grave, attacks a bunch of hooligans, and
50s greaser punks, which makes a lot more sense now.
It's all coming together.
Yeah.
And while she does, the priest who had done her funeral kind of appears out of nowhere. Karate launches himself off of like a mausoleum or some shit and beats up a bunch of the punks and then says,
I kick ass for the Lord.
And then he does until he is bitten by a zombified punk.
Yep.
And then he is a zombie. The nurse is a zombie. The mother is a zombie. The head punk is a zombie. And Lionel tries to corral them all in his house. Eventually there is, let's just gloss over this and say, some blackmail. His gross uncle and all of his weirdly sexual friends.
It was the 50s, man. Apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I would be more. I would believe the overtly sexual everything from that group of people if it were the 60s, but whatever. What do I know?
Well, he was a very repressed time.
That's fair. While they're there, the zombies break back out of the basement and just sort of.
Everybody at the party gets bitten, and everybody gets infected, and they all it turns into like a. I hesitate to use the word orgy, but it's like a blood orgy essentially.
Like a blood orgy.
It's just like it's just like bit after bit of
the zombie kills.
Yeah, they're all so inventive.
The kills that the zombies perpetrate on the party goers as the zombie ranks grow, as they attack party goers, just escalate.
Yeah, there's a point where. The greaser guy gets his intestines ripped out. The intestines come alive.
Yeah,
and they
with
start,
like a face and everything.
Yeah, and
it's
at one point
weird.
I think it farts, which is weird. But
missed that.
Yeah, and so that starts chasing him, and just to I don't know if you had a couple things that stuck out to you, but some of my
Just a
favorites.
couple.
Some of my favorites are when that one dude gets his entire rib cage pulled out.
I have that one.
That was great.
Yep.
Punching through the back of the head, out through the
My
mouth.
God. And then attacking the other girl
Unbelievable.
with her friends.
That's a perfect example of a great cut where it's like you don't even see it happen. And then it's
it
great.
was really like, and then there's the face getting just wholesale pulled off, which we talked about earlier. The bone legs. When they're pulling the guy into the room, like through like a doggy door or like a dumbwaiter or something, and he's like, help me, and he's like still moving his legs, but from like upper thigh down to his cowboy boots, his legs have just been gnawed to the bone, but he's still somehow like wiggling them.
Yep. You've got there's this one guy gets the top of his head cut off from like from the mouth, so it's just like from
a garden gnome.
Yeah, so it's just like the top teeth up. His head is just on the ground being like kicked around throughout the rest of the movie like a hockey puck. There's the woman who gets pushed onto the lamp, the light.
So I have a question.
It lights her head up from the inside.
Is that the same woman who gets punched through the back of the head?
I think it is.
I think so too.
Yeah,
Like
she
there's
had blood
already
all over her mouth.
Yeah, and there's already the hole back there, so it's just kind of like she just gets
there
kind of
you
like
go.
boop,
Exactly.
like, put on the light bulb.
And the one that
She
I
becomes a
forgot
lamp.
that they say that they essentially have on the front poster is the last woman left who's about to be turned into a zombie
Outside of Paquita.
outside of Paquita. Instead of just turning into another monster, this baby this zombie baby
We glossed over the zombie baby twice.
crawls into the back of her head and pulls her face apart from the inside and then like pushes his face out through the hole in her forehead.
But she's still kind of alive when it's first happening.
I've never seen anything like that in my life.
It's it's kind of a lot.
It's just kind of a lot. And then it all culminates with Lionel showing up. He gets knocked out through a window and he comes back with a lawnmower
Yes.
roped to his chest. Mm-hmm. A la Ash from Evil Dead.
With the chainsaw.
With the chainsaw. And he starts up the lawnmower and just runs into everybody, and it just turns into just blood.
Just
gore,
liquefying.
Everything all over the place.
Yeah.
And then Paquita.
She puts the baby zombie in a blender.
Yeah. And then at another
it
point
is like a dead baby joke. Remember when dead baby jokes were a thing in like 2003?
Yeah, the 50s, yes. Yeah. There's a point where, and then she ends up like pulling one dude's spine and using it like a baseball bat. It's just, it's you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, we could not possibly, we couldn't possibly describe all of the details of all of the batshit insane.
This movie came out 30 years ago, and I'm still reacting to it as though I just saw
it every day.
I hope they do a re-release on the DVD because I want to be in the commercial this time. And be one of those guys who are like, you need to see this movie. It's crazy. It's the most blood I've ever seen in a movie.
To be believed. Yeah. So we kind of glossed over the fact that when kicking ass for the Lord priest gets zombified, zombie priest and zombie nurse, fuck.
Yeah, apparently, because there is a baby who is.
And then they have a baby.
Yeah.
A horrible zombie baby.
Yeah.
Which there is a scene where for some you just there's no justification in the plot.
I can tell you why they did that scene.
I mean, I can tell you why too, in that it's hilarious to watch it.
True. But the reason that they did it is because they came in under budget, and so they had like $40,000 left or something.
God, really?
So he said, let's shoot that. And it's his favorite scene in the movie.
The scene that we're talking about is the zombie baby is born, and it is obviously a grotesque little monster that craves human flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So Lionel does the reasonable thing, which is get it an adorable baby carriage and take it to the playground, to the park, and try to treat it like it's a normal baby. And it escapes the carriage, of course, and starts trying to attack the other children and people around. And it results in Lionel having a kind of insane slapstick style fight with the baby, while like the nice neighborhood ladies watch on.
Yes.
While
yeah.
he like picks the baby up and by the legs and like slams it into the ground and
Yeah,
such.
it's pretty good. It's pretty well done.
It's horrible to describe and hilarious to watch.
So as to wrap it up,
How do we wrap this up?
I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts about this movie?
I don't really know what to say about
Yeah.
this movie.
Well, I guess in that case, let's go into the placement. This was number 125. Kind of similar. I wouldn't say similar to American Psycho, but this is very much has a comedic bent to it. But I would absolutely still consider this a horror movie just because zombies are in it.
Yeah.
More so than I would American Psycho.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How do you feel about the placement on the list?
I think it's a little high.
You think it should be closer to 200? Is that what you mean?
A little bit, yeah. Like not by necessarily much. Maybe
Yeah.
if you told me this was 140, I would buy it
Okay.
a little bit more.
Sure.
But it's just I feel like it's fairly niche. Like I feel like there are people who like horror movies because they like to be scared.
Sure.
And if you like horror movies because you like to be scared, this is not the movie for you. This is not a scary movie.
Yeah, I'm going to say it does not deserve its place on the list just because I just glanced at the list as you were saying that, and it is almost 10 spots higher than John Carpenter's The Thing,
Yeah.
which is unacceptable.
Yeah. It's
I
so-
love this movie, but like if we're talking, these are the 200 greatest horror movies of all time.
Exactly. Yeah,
You're not coming in higher than The Thing, all
right.
right?
So yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't deserve to be on the list. In fact, I think it very much does deserve to be on the list.
I do too. Yes.
I just question the placement that close to the top half of it.
Yeah. This, they always on lists like these, they always have. I always feel like the first few that they make it through are kind of like. They're not like the serious contenders, you know what I mean? Where this feels like one of those where if it was like 150 in that first group of 50, where it's like this is a notable movie.
Yes.
This is it's made by a fairly important filmmaker as far as the culture goes or
right.
pop
It's a
culture
bit of a
goes.
cult classic.
Yeah, it's a movie coming out of New Zealand, which is you don't see a ton of them in America anyway. I'm sure obviously they make movies, but
I mean,
I didn't even know they had Latin people. So, what year is it? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
We've taught Clay so much on this episode.
Yeah, I know. Jesus, I'm gonna have to start a podcast talking about this podcast. But yeah, I think it definitely deserves to be mentioned on this list. It probably 125 again. The Thing being where it is, probably should be lower.
Yeah, it's just sort of like if you take a quick scroll through the 75 that are rated closer, between it and 200, there's just some on there where you're like, what, really?
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with this list. I mean, the fact that The Thing is in the 100s.
The more we do this podcast and the more closely we look at this list, the more upset Clay gets.
Yeah, I mean, if it's up to me, when we get to The Thing, it's probably going to be me just making a case for an hour that The Thing should be number 2 at the lowest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would super disagree with that.
Top 5,
easily,
at least.
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're talking about Dead Alive.
We're just skipping way ahead.
Yeah, I think that's gonna do it. I hit the randomizer, beep, boop, beep, boop, 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 and I came up for the next one, number 131.
Oh.
Which is Ginger Snaps.
Ooh.
Which is a very fun movie that I haven't watched in a while.
I love it.
It's a werewolf movie. It's a lot of fun.
It's great.
Do you have any? Where did final thoughts? I guess
we did.
But yeah, I guess that's gonna do it for us for Dead Alive. If you haven't seen it, please watch it.
You should. If
watch it with a group of people. This is a perfect group of people movie.
Yes.
I think I watched this. I probably watched it at Sean's house for the first time.
Probably.
With all of our friends. I mean, your husband has seen it, so I probably watched it with him.
Yes.
These aren't really his thing.
This is not really his thing, and even he was sort of like, "Oh yeah, that one's fun."
Yeah.
Yeah. You just have to have a moderately strong stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a great fun party movie for gorehounds. And even people who, honestly, even people who aren't really into that thing, it's silly and over the top enough
Yeah.
that I feel like you can appreciate it.
Yeah. Forewarn your squeamish friends.
Yes.
Reassure them that
Don't eat any like cream of wheat. or-
no pasta with tomato sauce right beforehand.
Oh God! When he starts feeding, when the
like
nurse,
scrambled
the nurse
eggs or
whose head
whatever.
has been almost cut off,
no.
is eating the custard
No.
or whatever, and it starts coming out her neck hole, and then he tips her head back and starts pouring it down the. You gotta watch the movie anyway.
We cannot do it justice.
No, you really can't.
in words.
No.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you for putting up with these shenanigans on this episode.
Yes.
This one has been a wild one.
If you enjoyed it and you want to give us a rating or review on iTunes, that would be awesome. And we will see you next time with Ginger Snaps. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.